Hi there, folks, and welcome to the Physical Geology 101 video series. I'm Geology Professor Shawn Willsey. This video series is designed and modeled exactly like my college course. It's the same curriculum, it's the same content, the same material, but here on YouTube for you to enjoy and peruse at your leisure, whether you're a new learner of this material, learning geology for the first time, or maybe you learned years ago and you want a little bit of a refresher. Whatever the case may be, this is a video series for you. And if you're enjoying this, you can drop down to the video description and there's ways you can donate and support the geology education videos that I put together. So let's go ahead and get right to it. This is episode 38, and we're going to look at how deserts forms. We're going to be looking at deserts, not desserts. That's something very different. So we'll not be talking about desserts today, although just thinking about it's making me hungry. We're going to be looking at deserts, basically these areas on planet Earth where we have more water lost through evaporation or evapotranspiration than we get through precipitation. Now, when people think of deserts, there's a lot of images that come to mind. Might be something like you see there on the screen, like the desert Southwest with some, like Monument Valley, like something out of an old Western. Might be something quite different. Might be places where there's like a dry lake bed. There's a variety of landforms and processes that are dominant in the deserts, and that's what we'll look at with the next episode. But in this specific episode, we're going to look at basically how deserts form and why they exist. So as an example here, where I live in Twin Falls, Idaho, we get about 10 inches of rain per year on average, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but that's our mean annual precipitation amount. But our evapotranspiration, how much water we lose, is about 25 inches per year. So I definitely live in a desert climate, in a desert environment. And this is where some of these processes we're going to look at tend to dominate here. There's often very little to no vegetation in a lot of deserts. You can see that in the images there. Um, and usually we find that deserts actually are pretty important and a big part of the land surface on planet Earth. It's upwards of around 30% of Earth's land surface is some type of desert or arid type of region. So it's a very important part of the landscape here on planet Earth. And the main forces that shape deserts tend to be tectonics, water, which is ironic because they don't receive a lot of rainfall, yet when they do get rainfall, it can have a very pronounced and dramatic impact on the landscape. And even the wind plays a pretty important role in deserts, maybe more so than any other climate region on planet Earth. So when you think about deserts, don't just think about hot, dry places. I showed you a picture here of snow on these dunes here in the Sahara. And so snow and cold weather can be a part of desert regions as well. So let's dig into this. Let's look first at where we see deserts on planet Earth. This is just a quick snapshot of some of the known large desert regions on planet Earth and where they exist. So here in North America, where I live, I'm part of the Great Basin Desert. And really there's sort of sub names to some of these. There's like the Colorado Desert, the Mojave Desert, the Chihuahuan Desert, the Sonoran Desert. This just shows some of them, but we have a pronounced desert region here in the western and southwestern portions of North America. Down in South America, there's the Atacama Desert on the coast of Chile here, down to the Patagonia Desert. In Africa, we have the Sahara Desert, maybe the most well-known and largest desert on Earth, which kind of spills over across the Red Sea to the Arabian Desert, and other parts of the Middle East, and into parts of China and Mongolia with the Gobi Desert, some of these other deserts. So Australia has a few deserts. In fact, most of Australia's inland region is a large dry area. And there's even some deserts here in South Africa. So let's look at what sort of factors govern deserts. Why do these things even exist? What's controlling their distribution on planet Earth? And the number one factor, and we're going to explore this in quite a bit of detail here, it's going to feel a little bit like a meteorology lesson, but it's important to understand how the atmosphere works in order to figure out where the water is falling, places that are very rainy, and also where the water is not falling, like in these desert regions. So the number one factor that controls the location of deserts on planet Earth is latitude. In fact, if we go back to that graphic there, you might even see that a lot of the Earth's major deserts do line up along similar latitudes here, north and south of the equator. So let's just start with this basic idea for how the atmosphere moves air around. So at the poles, of course, we know it's cold at both the North Pole and the South Pole. And we also know that cold air sinks. So the air at the poles is sinking. It's moving from the atmosphere down to the surface. We also know that hot air rises. So at the equator, which has the highest temperatures on the planet typically, this is where we get a lot of air rising. So we have hot air rising in the tropics, cold air sinking in the poles. And if you just start with that basic premise there, that's going to set the stage for understanding exactly why we have deserts in some places. So cold air descending at the poles, hot air rising in the tropics along the equator. So the next thing to kind of put into motion here as we kind of make this a little bit more complicated is now let's take those two basic premises. So cold air sinking at the poles, hot air rising at the equator. Well, the hot air rising from the equator, it can't rise indefinitely. It can't escape Earth's gravity. So this air, as it rises from the surface, it actually rises and it cools. As it cools, it starts moving towards the poles. Okay, so in a simple, if the Earth's atmosphere doesn't look exactly like this, we're going to make things a little bit more complicated. But let's go with this simplified model here. Hot air rising at the equator, that air then moving back towards the poles where it sinks. And then once that air sinks, it runs into the Earth's surface and it starts moving along the Earth's surface back towards the equator where it progressively gets warmer and then it rises again. So we have this simple circulation model, basically simple convection, basically hot air rising, cold air sinking at the equator and at the poles. So that's the first little setup we're going to do here. Now, when that air, let me go back one real quick here. When that air rises at the equator, air that rises cools, the water vapor trapped in that can form clouds, and this is where we get a lot of the Earth's rainfall. So where we see this air masses rising here along the equator, this creates an area of low pressure, and this is known as the intertropical convergence zone. So right here along the equator, you can see that there's quite a bit of cloud cover here. This is where we see a lot of the clouds and therefore a lot of the rainfall that falls on planet Earth tends to be right around this equatorial belt. Now, this thing moves a little bit with the seasons. It doesn't stay fixed right at the equator. As we go into May, June, July, the northern hemisphere summer, this thing migrates to the north a little bit. And then as we move into November, December, January, it moves a little bit south. But it more or less straddles the equator, moves a little bit north or south depending on the seasons. And this is an area where we have clouds and rainfall because this is where that warm, moist air is rising. In fact, if you look at the distribution of the rainforest on the planet, so where is it the rainiest, the wettest places on Earth? You think of like the Amazon basin here in Brazil, parts of Central Africa, parts of Southeast Asia and Indonesia. This coincides nicely with this intertropical convergence zone. Right along the equator, it's where the warm, moist air is rising, producing clouds and producing high amounts of rainfall. So then if we just add one more kind of complexity to it, so it's not as simple as what I showed with just air moving from the poles down to the equator, rising and moving back. The other complicating factor is the Earth is spinning. It's rotating on its axis. This is something called the Coriolis force or the Coriolis effect, and I'm not going to get into the physics of that and exactly what goes on with that in this episode. But suffice it to say, if you kind of look at the diagram here and we start at the equator, you can see this is where the air is warmest. The air is rising. It's producing clouds, as you can see on the diagram here. That air then moves away from the equatorial region once it rises sufficiently that it's cooling. And as that cool air moves back towards the poles, right at around 30-ish degrees latitude is where it starts to sink. And when air sinks, it does the opposite of air rising. Air rising cools, expands, produces clouds and rain. Air that's sinking actually warms up as it's sinking. It inhibits any cloud formation. It actually dries out the air, if you will, and therefore we get essentially no clouds and no rainfall where air is sinking or descending from above. So right at around 30 degrees latitude, instead of having low pressure where the air is rising, we get high pressure. High pressure forms a lot of times when air is sinking from above. Notice there's another situation up here as we head towards the poles where air that is moving from the poles also sinks at around 30 degrees. Some of that air moves back towards the poles where it rises, and that creates another low pressure area in here. So we get areas where there's a lot of rainfall. If you live in, the Gulf Coast area, the Gulf of Alaska area there, it's a quite wet environment. Quite a bit of precipitation falls. So if we look where these lows are, like at the equator and at about 60 degrees latitude, that's where a lot of rainfall and clouds form. And if we look at where the high pressure is, right around 30 degrees latitude, and also at the poles, this tends to be places where it's quite dry because the air is sinking or settling from above. So this really sets into motion the dominant control for the deserts. The deserts tend to be right at around this sort of 25 or 30-degree latitude. That coincides nicely with these deserts. The main control is this high pressure area where the air is sinking from above, and it just inhibits cloud formation and also rainfall. But there's other controls on deserts as well, things that also create deserts in other environments. And you can see on the diagram here, there's, places well beyond that latitude where deserts exist. So let's explore a few of those factors. So another factor that comes into play is what's known as the rain shadow effect. So if we have a pronounced topographic barrier, like a mountain or a volcano, something like that, and we have moist, warm air coming in maybe off the ocean, or there's some supply of warm, moist air, as that air rises up over that topographic barrier, it's going to tend to drop most of its precipitation on this side of the topography. This is sometimes what we call the windward side. So you're going to get a lot of rainfall, a lot of snow, perhaps, depending on the elevations and the temperatures on this side of the mountain. And then once that air mass gets over the top of that topographic feature and it starts to descend, well, that's again air that's sinking, right? Remember we talked about air rising. So here on this side of the mountain, the air is lifting, it's rising, it's expanding, and it's producing clouds and precipitation. But where the air is descending or sinking here on the backside, or what we sometimes call the leeward side of this topographic feature, this is where the air is actually warming up. As it's descending, the molecules are actually colliding, so the air is getting hotter and warmer, and it's going to produce more, it's going to dry out the air considerably. We're not going to see as much rain or precipitation on this side of the mountain, and this is what's called a rain shadow. You can really see that quite nicely if we focus on the Big Island of Hawaii, place that I'm quite familiar with. This is the northern tip of the Big Island. This is an older volcano that's pretty well eroded, but it's still a significant topographic barrier called Kohala, rises up to about 6,000 feet or so there on the Big Island. And the trade winds are the dominant weather maker in the Hawaiian Islands. So here in the tropics, most of the weather comes out of the northeast. So all this warm, moist air over the ocean, over the Pacific, comes in and it runs into the Big Island of Hawaii, and it's forced to rise up the slopes of this big topographic barrier, Kohala. And you can really see on this Google Earth image just the color difference, how green it is on this side of the volcano or the mountain here, and then how brown and dry it is on this side over here. But just to give you some real data and numbers here, so picking one of the rainfall stations here on the windward side, or on the northeast side of Kohala, we get a mean annual rainfall amount of about 149 inches, right around 378 centimeters. So a tremendous amount of rain falls on this side of the island. But when we go to the other side of the island, the leeward side, or the rain-shadowed side of Kohala, we get something like 9 inches. So that's and these two stations here are probably only like, I don't know, like 30 miles apart. It's an incredible difference in rainfall amounts. And the rainfall, of course, is influencing the plants and animals that live in that community. It really drives the ecosystem. So a really enhanced rain shadow effect there on the Big Island of Hawaii due to these volcanoes, due to the topography and the proximity to the oceans there. Just a tremendous example of the rain shadow effect, and its influence on weather and climate. So it's, even though it's Hawaii and you think of Hawaii as like, oh, it's a tropical paradise. Well, there are parts of Hawaii that are quite literally deserts, and there's cacti growing there, and it's dry and quite arid in places, just depending on which part of the island you're on. And it's incredibly variable from one place to the next. Another big control we have on deserts and what controls their locations tends to be their position within a continent. The further away you are from The ocean and its moisture sources, these tend to be drier areas. So here we have the Gobi Desert and the Taklamakan Desert here in parts of Mongolia and China. And these deserts here sit in the rain shadow of the Himalayas to some degree, but they're also just very isolated. They're sort of in the middle of this part of Asia, isolated from the moisture sources that come off the ocean, and so they tend to be quite dry. So this can also have an effect on controlling where the deserts exist. If you look at these two deserts on a map with latitude, you'll see that they're quite a ways north of that 20 to 30 degree kind of Goldilocks zone we talked about, where high pressure dominates, or about right around 40 degrees or so, maybe a good 10 to 15 degrees north of that high pressure latitude. But part of their reason is that they're quite isolated in this continental interior location. And then our last one here is looking at cold ocean currents. So cold water tends to have, and the cold air that comes with it tends to have less. We use the word capacity to hold moisture versus warm air. Warm air is, of course, what fuels hurricanes and big tropical systems, storms. Cold air doesn't have that amount of moisture in it, and so places that are adjacent to these cold ocean currents tend to be quite dry as well. And a good example here is the Atacama Desert along the coast of South America here in Chile. Now, there's a bit of a double whammy here because we have the Andes Mountains, which are a major topographic barrier. The weather is coming in from the east, and so it is rain shadowed for sure. But definitely another effect of this that creates this desert here is this cold ocean current that comes up from Antarctica and goes north along the coast of Chile. Eventually, it gets warmer as it gets closer to the equator, and then it kind of circulates back around in this sort of counterclockwise fashion here. But these cold ocean currents in the Atacama Desert are a big player here in creating deserts. So there's some secondary factors that can be at work as well. So that's some of the reasons why we have deserts on planet Earth, some of the meteorological reasons. So let's do a quick quiz. People like the quizzes for these episodes. So here's a quiz question for you, multiple choice. Which of the following is the primary reason most deserts form? We've got A, high temperatures, B, lack of vegetation, C, descending dry air where high pressure exists, D, sandy soils, or E, the aliens stole our water. So I'll give you a second to consider that, or you might want to pause the video while you think about that question. Okay, let's go ahead and answer the question then. So, as we've hopefully done a good job here in educating each other, the main reason, the main control over deserts, remember they can have high temperatures or low temperatures. There's plenty of cold deserts. In fact, the polar regions can be considered deserts because they don't receive very much precipitation. And while some deserts have a lack of vegetation, that's actually an effect, right? That's not the cause of the desert. That's an effect of having a desert. And so the answer here was C, the high pressure regions and descending dry air, whether it's from the rain shadow effect or from latitude and just the way the atmosphere works. That is the main reason why we see these high pressure regions exist, and these coincide pretty nicely with the deserts. So stay tuned for my next episode, episode 39, where we start to explore some of the desert processes and landforms that are common on planet Earth. And thanks for joining us.